Our panel is entitled, What Kind of Information is Available from the Federal Government? So the first speaker will be Daniel Burgard. And 1 minute, I know. Daniel is Executive Director of Library Information Services for University of North Texas Health Science Center. And Dan has served as Director of the Jefferson D. Leaves Health Science Library at the University of North Texas Health Science Center. And since September of 2009, and Director of Regional Office of the National Library of Medicine. I'll introduce others as we start. So, Danny, since you're already.
Thank you. Okay, what kinds of information are available from the federal government? Easy, all kinds. So people at work have been teasing me for the last couple weeks as I tell them I've got 10 minutes to explain what kind of information is available from the National Library of Medicine and the National Institutes of Health, and they just laugh at me and walk away. So here is my quick attempt to tell you. We'll see if I can manage to do the clicking and hold the microphone in the right way. So what's this? Real quick, some background information. Whoop. My day job's Director of the Health Science Library at the University of North Texas in Fort Worth. I also hold an assignment as the Director of the Regional Office of the National Library of Medicine. So on the scale of beautiful libraries, there might be the Library of Congress at one end and maybe the National Library of Medicine at the other. This is in Bethesda, Maryland, on the campus of the NIH. This low part with the thing that looks like a nun's cap on top, that's where the offices of the National Library of Medicine are. The tall building is the Lister Hill Center for Biomedical Communications. Many of the advanced data types and data services, data interfaces, search interfaces are created in that tall building. The one distinguishing factor of the older part of the National Library of Medicine, most of it's underground. There are about 55 miles of shelving below this low part here. All the books they get are underground. Okay, and I'm making this up. We have to add this to every discussion, National Library of Medicine. It was conceived in the late 1950s, built and occupied in the early 1960s at the height of the Cold War. They built it so that if there was a nuclear war, this white building part you see will collapse and that weird looking nun's hat will fall down and cover the books that are below the ground. So it's that era government building. It's true. You can look it up. Beyond its mission to collect the world's biomedical information and make it available to all of the citizens of the United States and other countries around the world, National Library of Medicine specifically tasked to build, curate, and provide sophisticated access to molecular biology and genomic information, and to create high-quality information services relevant to toxicology, environmental health, and other topics. So beyond just collecting and being a standard type library with a lot of print material, they are tasked to do some advanced things as well. Click. Here is an example. You'll see, I think, slides like this from some of the other presenters. National Library of Medicine maintains a regional medical library system. There are 8 regions around the country. You know where we're at in Texas, we're right under that green dot. That is the South Central region. That's the office that's now housed and coordinated out of the University of North Texas Health Science Library in Fort Worth. So what we do in that region, or in these offices, we're tasked to promote, engage in community outreach efforts, and teach classes that promote National Library of Medicine resources and services. Clearly, different regions around the country, you can see where they're hosted. Ours just happens to be Texas, and the state's lucky enough to border on Texas. Click, click. Let me get into the data part. So here we go. Let's jump in. What kinds of data are available from the National Library of Medicine and NIH? A little bit about NIH, mostly NLM. All kinds of data types. Most people in this room know about NLM's bibliographic data. You know, we have PubMed, things like that. But we run all the way down through some sophisticated genetic data types. I want to make the point on the right about the different audiences. We have data that's everything for what we call basic sciences in the health science world, basic bench research scientists. We have data that's been curated, developed for use by healthcare professionals, physicians, nurses, PAs, physical therapists, public health professionals. We make data and search interfaces for the general public as well. And that data can be for all ages. We have data, I'll show you a screen from a thing called Toxtown a little bit. It's for children. We have things for adults as well. And also data in many languages. I think I have a couple screenshots from a tool called Medline Plus that has a full Spanish site. A lot of also health information resources made, data in Vietnamese and other languages. One thing I want to make sure I made a slide for, I don't want to forget this part. I'm not going to just mention, or we're not just talking about data produced by the employees of the National Library of Medicine and the National Institutes of Health. You know, National Institutes of Health, NIH, is one of the major funders of basic research in the United States. And as you've seen over the last several years, with the bibliographic output of federally funded research is now mandated to be deposited. Well, we're starting down the track of mandating the deposit of the data generated from NIH and other federally funded research. So NIH and the National Library of Medicine specifically, sidebar, National Library of Medicine has now been designated by the director of the NIH to be the data manager for all NIH institutes. So the the NLM is also going to start developing standards and tools to create repositories, some repositories or standards for the deposit of data generated by those scientists that they fund. As I contemplated how to even explain what kinds of data are available from NIH, NLM. One thing that we talk about in the health science world is bench to bedside. This is a mnemonic device to keep in mind. You know, we have data that's just generated, primary data generated from health science research in a laboratory, all the way down to data that's used by either patients or healthcare professionals. So it runs the gamut. And I think the rest of my presentation, I just have some examples to show you. PubMed Central, you know, that's bibliographic data, now up to several million articles that have been deposited in PubMed Central. And these are, again, the results of federally funded research. It's the bibliographic output of federally funded research. Medline Plus, I mentioned that. Here we are at the other end of the scale. This is not data for healthcare researchers or professionals. This is data manipulated and output in a form for consumption by the general public. So it's health information written at an easy to understand level, including complicated topics like genes and gene therapy. I'm going to show you some of the other end of the spectrum gene data made available by NIH in a few minutes. So genes and gene therapy, here's where I will go to read, because it starts out very simple. Genes are the building blocks of inheritance. Okay, I got that part. So when it gets more complicated, data for, I forgot about this one. Toxtown. Toxtown is a National Library of Medicine tool that tries to, it uses, its underlying Toxtown is toxicological and environmental data, but it's been manipulated and put into a graphic form so that children can both learn and be entertained at the same time about environmental health. We keep moving down the list. So I mentioned the Lister Hill Center for Biomedical Communications, that big tall building that when there's a nuclear war, it gets blown over. Well, that's where the people that make many of these more advanced tools were going into work. So you see in the upper left-hand corner of that screen, NCBI, National Center for Biotechnical Information. Most, if not all, of the more advanced interfaces and data sets that come out of the National Library of Medicine and the interfaces that search through data generated by other NIH agencies, most of those tools come out of the National Center for Biotechnical Information, which is again right there on the NIH campus next to the main NLM building. what I wanted to point out on this slide, there's some topics on the left, but practically every National Library of Medicine database that you look at, you'll see a thing on here that says download with some downward pointing arrow. You can download onto your computer almost all of these data sets. For the geeky librarians in the audience, you can actually download PubMed, the entire PubMed database, onto your local computer. You have to write your own interface, which you may not want to do, but again, all of these data sets are publicly available. So created by the National Library of Medicine and NIH, and they have interfaces created by them as well, but most of them are available if you so wanted to. How am I doing on time? Good. Oh, God. Search NCBI databases. Here's one of the more advanced genetic information tools, BLAST. I have a slide at the end. I have some handouts if you want them with some URLs. They also have interesting blogs that help people use their tools, like genome data download made easy. Really quick, I'm skip that slide. NIH has a couple initiatives going. You know, they have a lot of data sharing repository information and data sharing policies. Just this week, there's action going through the United States Congress on federally funded research data sharing legislative activity, the Open Government Data Records Act going through Congress, working on the concept of mandated deposit. There are numerous issues around that when we're talking about healthcare information. We don't have time to talk about those. I think that's the end of my presentation. Again, thanks for listening. Just try to keep in mind there's a wide range of data. It's a range from data for scientists, data for public, data for young people, data for old people, data for English speakers, data for non-English speakers. I think that's all I have. Good?
Okay. We'll be back for the question at the end. I thought we are 50 minutes behind, but we are good, I think, in time. So our next speaker will be Cheryl Abbot, and she is a regional economist with the Southwestern Information Office of the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics, BLS. As chief of the information unit, she is responsible for regional data analysis, publication of news release, and public outreach in the 5 states region. Through the interaction with the press, researchers, business and labor organizations, and the general public, she promotes a better understanding of BLS data, its potential impact of day-to-day life.
All right, who is BLS and what do they do? Since I'm with a group of librarians, I'm assuming you probably know who we are. But what I'm going to try and concentrate on here is a little bit of our background, and I'm very interested in what I've heard about this group and your concerns about maintaining data integrity. That's something that's very interesting to me. It's not something I hear a lot about. So we'll go into a little on the Bureau's website and how we have some interactive mapping tools that if you guys get involved in research, it should make your life easier. It's much more quick to find colorful interfaces to show to various people who may be researching topics. And can she find the next button? All the way there. Whoop. Up there.
Just press enter.
Enter, that'll work. Okay, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. BLS is an independent statistical agency. We're about 30 years older than the Department of Labor, and I love to point that out to everyone. And it's sort of a coincidence that I found this quote on our website about our first commissioner. And I think it's very appropriate to read it to this group considering the topic you guys are discussing. Carroll Wright was his name, and he was appointed in 1884. And the quote said, "Perhaps Carroll Wright's greatest accomplishment as the first BLS commissioner was the establishment of the principle that the Bureau would be devoted to, quote, the fearless publication of the facts without regard to the influence those facts may have upon any party's position or any partisan's view." That's the approach the Bureau takes. Totally apolitical, totally professional. We produce the data, we tell you all about it. We let the public do what they will with the information. So you've probably seen our BLS statistics in the news, in your job, and in your home. And I think I've got some little motion activated ones here. Except, there we go. And I also think the shots here are pretty old. The one thing I'd like to point out is the Labor Department is one who usually gets the credit for all of our data, as opposed to BLS. Yeah. But that's just part of life. First Friday of the month is when you hear the information in the news about payroll growth, job growth, the unemployment rate. If you have kids, you've probably heard of the Occupational Outlook Handbook. That is the most visited site on the BLS website with millions of hits every month. And this is part of the Occupational Outlook Handbook. I'm not sure you can read this, but it looked up librarians, showing the median annual wage is about $58,000 compared to a total for all occupations of $37,000. So librarians are doing fairly well compared to the average U.S. citizen. And in the home. I'm sure most of you know that the CPI is used to adjust Social Security. What you may not know is that it's also used to adjust your income tax rates. People often find that to be something they weren't aware of. The rates are adjusted every year to take into account increases in the cost of living. And I love this with the screen on the back, so I can look at it and not turn my back on you guys. These are our subject areas. Going to go over them really quickly. Employment, unemployment, inflation and prices, productivity. That's been in the news a lot more recently. Pay and benefits, we have tons of information on that. Spending and time use. If people are interested in consumer expenditures for medical care or health insurance, we've got that information. Workplace injuries and illnesses, and I should probably fix that slide and say we also do workplace fatalities. This acronym, of course, work for the government, we have to have an acronym for everything, but we've been following these priorities forever, as far as I'm concerned. But our last commissioner, Erica Grosjean, or someone she worked with, came up with this acronym of AORTA, meaning our priorities, our accuracy. We have to be objective in everything we do. Data have to be relevant. And in that area, what we're talking about is as new topics come up, we need to collect data. Actually, we've already done the survey on contingent workers, which is the Ubers, the gig worker economy. We did that in our March supplement. Don't have the data out yet, but we did it. So relevancy, timely, and accessible. She has to struggle to read the last one, which of course is what you guys are dealing with. Okay, talking about big data, which has been in the news a lot lately, a lot of conferences on it. This is something else our former commissioner, right now we are under acting commissioner. The new commissioner has yet to be selected by the president, so we're waiting on that. But her thought was that government data and government statistics were not being sidelined by all of the big data projects that are out there. Actually, we should be headlined. And I'm not just talking about BLS, I'm talking about all the other government statistics. Because our information is used for transparency, Also for continuity, our producer price index goes back to the early 1900s. And we also produce weights, which I won't go into, but I'll just say it's extremely important. And when any of the big data projects come back and tell you how they're doing in their data collection, they always compare back to the Bureau's information or perhaps NIH, whatever type of statistic that they're publishing. Pardon me. Okay, and here's the map that Dan mentioned that shows the coverage. I'm over the southwest region, which is Texas and all the lucky states that are nearby. But our office actually goes all the way up to the border with Canada. Our Kansas City Information Office covers the northern tier, but we go from Gulf Coast up to Canada. And although I've never been fortunate enough to make a trip to Montana, I'm told that it is truly a day-long adventure in trying to get there for our people to do the work. This is an example of some of the publications we put out, and I'm not sure if we were able to get them distributed this morning, some of them.
We have them on the registration table, so
Oh,
feel free to pick them
okay,
up later.
please stop by and get some of them, mainly because they're going to show you in one small handout the range of information that we produce. Like the economic summaries, I'm pretty proud of those. We started putting them out a few years ago, and it's done by the regional offices, so I found it interesting, looking around the room for who said it, that perhaps one of the missing gaps with government information were publications done by regional offices. I perked right up when that was mentioned. But we do the economic summaries, we do various industry summaries. These are the types of things anyone could put out with a little desktop experience, but using our data alone. Now, I've only got a few left, but here is where I want to show you the online mapping abilities that we have. Some are good, some are bad, but all of them, because they're visual, give you a quick overview of the information. Unemployment rates. This shows us the state rates and counties within a state. You can do it for all 50 states. You can pull up a county. You can look at over-the-year change. You can see right now from those indicators that, of course, this area is certainly having a problem. Most of that is related to oil and gas. And then in the state of Texas, you can see the Houston, Beaumont, the Gulf Coast area, also being impacted by oil and gas and also by issues with petroleum refining. Now this is the one that's best. We've had it for, I bet, 5 years, and it's still on what we label as our beta test site. It works great, guys. You can look at the 50 states again, or you can select an individual state and go down to the county level, and you can look at industry employment concentrations, or what we call location quotients. If someone wants to know professional and business services, in what counties am I going to find above average concentrations in that sector? This is an easy way of getting to it and mapping it. And below the map, which you can't see, is actually a table of the output as well that you can just pop into Excel. Another example is we've got wage data. You can plot either the absolute level of the wage data or an over-the-year change. This is OES data. The maps are static. They aren't quite as good. This one, though, is showing you petroleum engineer employment. You can see it's Texas on up through the Rocky Mountains. This one is showing wage levels, and I'm virtually sure you can't read the legend that I've circled there, but it's showing you that the bottom of that wage range is $77,000 up to $194,000. I just wanted to put that there because you can see how important these occupations are to the Southwest in particular. I think, yeah, this is the last slide. And this is an example of the tabular data that comes out. Shows you here the highest paying areas across the country, and there are 4 of them that are in the Southwest region. Well, actually 4 of them that are in Texas. And I believe that is it. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Hope. Hope is the director of the Texas Regional United States Patent and Trademark Office. And as the director of the Texas Regional United States Patent and Trademark Office, which is USPTO, Hope carries out the strategic direction of the Undersecretary of Commerce for Intellectual Property and director of the USPTO, and is responsible for leading the Texas Regional Office.
All right, I'm going to take a general survey real quick. Do we? How many of you are librarians here? All right, and then how many non-librarians? I didn't see. Okay. How many of you know what a patent is? Great. Okay, how many know what a trademark is? All right, fantastic. We're starting with a great baseline. I come a lot of times with a lot of people who don't know what that is. So the United States Patent and Trademark Office, we are, like all the other agencies, government is very data-driven. And so for us, we capture data on innovation and specifically on patents and trademarks. What I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about our office, talk a little bit about the regional office, so you'll see the same map that you just saw shown a couple of different places, and then talk a little bit about the different data that we actually produce. And so we are headquartered in Alexandria, Virginia, and we have around 13,000 employees. The lion's share of our employees are patent employees. There's about 8,300 employees that are patent examiners, and then we have about 570 of them are trademark examiners. The lion's share of our workforce is technical. To be a patent examiner, you have to have a technical background. You have to have an engineering background or a hard science background because they're reviewing technical information in the patents itself. And so 80% of our workforce is technical. We have judges within our workforce as well, and because they hear cases both on the patent side as well as the trademark side. This year, we have currently issued our 9.7 millionth patent. And so we are closing in on 10 million patents very soon. We received last year over 650,000 patent applications, and that has been on an exponential growth on a year-by-year growth. On the trademark side, we received 530,000 trademark applications. Last year, we issued about 330,000 patents, and we granted cert on about 227,000 trademark applications. So here's the map, similar to what everyone else has pointed out. In 2011, the President signed the America Invents Act, which allowed for the opening of 4 regional offices. So the regional office concept for the USPTO is fairly new compared to some of our sister agencies that are sitting here. Each of the regional offices broke down the United States in different areas. So for my office, we not only cover Texas and lovingly all of the surrounding states, but we also have Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama. I want to be real clear, though, on what coverage means for our regional office. Coverage for our regional office means from an outreach perspective. So events like this or going out to support different outreach events, that's what each of the regional offices do. The regional offices are not broken down by who is placed where, and we don't process applications necessarily based on a regional basis. So for example, if you are filing a patent or you are filing a trademark with our office and you live in Texas, that does not mean that our office is necessarily going to process that. We have 8,300 patent examiners nationwide. My office has 100 patent examiners. Texas files the second most number of patent applications, and they receive the second most patents out of any state in the country. So my office would not physically be able to handle just Texas. We might be able to handle Dallas, but we may not be able to handle Texas in and of itself. And so in my office, we have about 140 different people. Right now, we are now fully staffed. We actually just opened up in November of 2015. One of the things that I wanted to point out, since we're talking about data, is that we have what's called a public search facility, which has 8 different workstation terminals that allows you to come into our office to search our databases that our examiners use. This is both on the patent side and on the trademark side. This database is different than what you would get generally doing a Google search. So if you have a new invention or a new logo that you're trying to decide to put into your new business and you want to see if someone else is using it, you can do a general Google search and it'll get you some results. But if you come to our office, you use a database, you'll get twice as many results using our particular database. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is we're pulling international information. So we're pulling from the databases from Europe and from Japan and other different areas so that you can see from a worldwide basis on whether your invention has been disclosed or has been invented worldwide. The other thing is that we are pulling from what we call non-patent sources. So that is publications from research areas, research papers, could be articles or presentations. We're looking at all of that information to see, even though you may have an idea, it doesn't mean it hasn't been thought about and it hasn't been discussed somewhere else. And so we want to make sure that when you get the patent, that it is a legitimate patent and it hasn't been invented before. So those are the databases that we are pulling from our office. But you can come to our office or any one of over 80 libraries across the country. Dallas Public Library has a workstation terminal as well in which you can pull that information as well. Part of the reason that we have a lot of data as well is that we do a lot of outreach events. Here's just a general pie chart of the different stakeholders that we are servicing. It goes from anyone in the K through 12 arena to corporations. And so we're looking at all of these different stakeholders to be able to provide them the necessary information that we have, because kids, they have patents as well. One of the earliest patents from a kid is actually the popsicle patent, and it was created by an 11-year-old. So kids do have patents, they do have creative ideas, and they do come to our office to get patents as well. So one of the ways that we have gathered a lot of our data, because we have a lot of data on technology, areas of technology, companies like to look at our data to see where there might be pockets of areas that may be missing technology. Or they may be they have a very rare technology and they're trying to figure out if there's another company out there that they can partner with to help them be able to put in the missing piece and advance their technology forward. So we've put together a couple of different websites that allows you to look at different pieces of information. One of these is our open data portal. And this data portal gives you a lot of information statistics-wise pulled from our patent databases. What this chart shows, and I know it's really small, but what you can do is you can pull up a chart and it's a heat map. And it pulls up all the different types of different patents in their technology areas. And so you can go in and say, hey, The area that has the most number of patents is in this particular area nationwide, and in fact, that happens to be in the biochem area. We have more biochem patents than any other type of patent nationwide. In Texas, we have well patents. That shouldn't be a big surprise, right? Big oil and gas. So that's the #1 type of patent that is generated from Texans here. So you can go in there, you can break it down, you can look at all the different types of patents, you can pull it up from a state-by-state basis, you can pull it up trends over different decades as well, so you can see where it's gone. One of the things that I think has been interesting for me to see is that over the last 30 years, we've seen an increase in telecommunication patents. And with Dallas being telecom corridor, I think that that's fascinating within Texas that has actually steadily risen up from, I want to say, fifth place about 30 years ago, but now it's second place as far as the number of patents that are generated within the Texas area. So it's information like that that you can get, trending data. Here's another chart in which you can look at universities, their patent counts. How much are they spending R&D wise relative to the patents that they are getting? How much licensing revenue are the universities getting from their various patents? So you can pull this information and look at that, do some comparisons, and kind of find different areas on that. Another area, another database that we've created is called Patents View. And this particular slide is a different type of heat map, and it shows which companies holds the largest number of patents. That's what this one particularly is. So the big brown circle, okay, this one right here, is actually IBM. They own 101,000 patents. And so IBM has the largest one. I kind of clicked on this. This one actually over here is HP. And HP is a Texas-based company. And so they own 26,000 patents. And so it kind of shows you, it gives you a heat map of who are the patent holders within the area. You can also, here's another map of just Texas and different inventions, so it's just different trends that you could see, so it's just another view of different USPTO data that is easy and accessible for you to use. One of the things that I want to point out, and this is the last thing, is that what we did was we did a hackathon last year. And we did a challenge to see if someone could take the data that we had, specifically in this one was the Open Data Portal data, and we wanted to see what they could do with it. So we had an app challenge, and we wanted to see specifically related to the White House Cancer Moonshot Task Force. What I don't know, have you guys heard of the Cancer Moonshot program? So last year, Vice President Biden had put out there an initiative related to Cancer Moonshot, related to cancer, and it was called Cancer Moonshot. What he wanted to do was to try to see if we can accelerate the pace of finding cures for cancer at the end of the day. So we partook in that particular endeavor, and we came up with the Cancer Moonshot Task Force. We did a couple of different things. We allowed for patents that were associated with cancer treatment to be accelerated through the patent system, so we would review it and process it faster. But the other thing is that we also went through and had an app challenge to see if there was additional information that can be gathered cancer related. And we had a number of different applicants, and the winner actually was a company called Docera. And what they were able to do was they were able to take our data and they were able to visualize genetic and epidemiology of cancer related to cancer funding and patenting and clinical testing. At the end of the day, what they were looking for was they were able to pull data to try to figure out who is doing research in what area of cancer so that they could figure out or put partners together on that particular technology. So they were using that data and they created a program to be able to kind of match those different organizations together to help them be able to advance their research so hopefully they can push it forward faster in finding the cure for cancer. So that is all I have. And is there any others? One more speaker. All right, thank you.
Okay, our last speaker would be Susana Privett. Some of you probably attended her presentation yesterday. She will continue today on the same topic. Susana Privett is data dissemination specialist for the U.S. Census Bureau, covering Texas and Oklahoma. As the data dissemination specialist, Susana gives presentation and conducts workshop about Census Bureau data.
Hello, my name is Susana Privett. As he said, I am a data dissemination specialist, and actually what that really means is I'm a resource for census data. Anything census you have a question about, I'm your person. I work out of my home. I cover all of Texas and Oklahoma, so if I'm not in my car, I'm at home in Terrell, Texas. So just contact me and I'll be happy to help you. What I wanted to talk about, you know, when they said we want you to talk about the data that's available, I've kind of felt like if I put some raw meat on a skillet and passed it over a flame and told you it was cooked, you know what I mean, that kind of a thing, it's just not going to be possible for you to believe that. So for me to tell you that I can tell you everything that we have, it's kind of that same concept. You're just not going to believe me. So for any of you who have been on our site before, you know that sometimes it's difficult to find the data that you need, but again, that's where I can help you. I just want to show you some examples of some of the data that we have. I know a lot of you are probably pretty familiar with our data. We are the data collector for the nation. We collect data for a lot of other government agencies, such as BLS.
And they do a fine job.
Thank you. So let me. So what I'm doing is pulling up a table. The table number is NP01. It's a narrative profile. And a lot of you may not even know that this particular table exists, and there's a reason for that. The folks at headquarters wanted to do away with it because they said nobody uses it, and we said nobody knows it exists. That's why they don't use it. So we try to talk about this table, but I thought it would be a good example to just show some of the information that most people are aware that we collect, and then I'll talk about some other. So the NP01 table is a combination of narrative and graphics. They're working on adding more topics, so it's limited to about, I believe, 15 topics. But this is a good representation of some of the data that we collect. Here, nativity, foreign born with the graphic, and I chose Dallas County as my geography. Language, again, for Dallas County, Spanish, 82.8%. I don't think any of us are surprised about that. Geographic mobility, 82.8 in the same residents, and that is across the board. I don't care where I've been, that's usually it's in the low 80s because we all have a tendency to just stay where we are. Educational attainment, especially in Dallas County, it's kind of either end of the spectrum with education, whether less than or at least a high school diploma. That always seems to even out. We have a lot of data on disability, employment status, and then industries, which in most areas that I look at the chart, usually educational services, healthcare, and social assistance, which of course we all know, schools, hospitals, anything related to healthcare is usually the highest as far as industries are concerned. occupations, commuting to work, which I was telling some of them in the workshop yesterday. This is a question that we ask on the American Community Survey. We ask you, what time do you leave to go to work in the morning and how long does it take you? And that was one of the top 5 questions that people would call to complain about because they felt we might be following them or wanting to visit their home when they weren't there. So, not that they thought it had anything to do with transportation or anything, but anyway. Income, I always find this section very interesting. Of course, the gender difference. Then the sources of the income. We also have data on poverty. And in this case, the female household families, again, that's a number that's always extremely high in any area that you look at, unfortunately. Health insurance, obviously population numbers, whether we're counting the population every 10 years, as we will be doing in 2020, we're ramping up for that. And by the way, we will have a local regional census center in Irving that will be opening in April. So if you know of anyone that's wanting to work for us, we'd be happy to have them. Housing characteristics, this is the type of housing units, and of course most are single family or single unit structures, which could be a house or an apartment or condo. Occupied housing characteristics, in this case highlighting heating, and of course in Texas, electricity and gas are probably the 2 main heating fuel sources. Housing costs. I also was mentioning yesterday in my workshop how I'm a single person and I've been leasing probably most of my adult life simply because I didn't want the burden of the care of a home, and that was my choice. And so I had started using several years ago census data to decide where I would move next and the neighborhood that I wanted to live in. And people aren't aware that you can actually use that data to kind of do research on where you're moving. I wanted a neighborhood that reflected who I was, that everyone went to work every day, everyone was middle class like me, we all mowed our yards and cared about where we lived. And so I felt that the data helped me find that type of an area, and I've been successful. So now let me go to another area on our site. And I'm still on census.gov. I'm going to surveys and programs, all surveys and programs. We have, as it says here in this first line, we conduct more than 130 surveys and censuses. So that's why I say it's really hard for me to tell you everything that we have available to you. I learned a long time ago when I would answer the phone in the office and they would ask about data, and I'd say, no, we don't collect that. Every time I got burnt because we did collect that data. I just didn't know we collected that data. So all the surveys that we do are listed here, and these are hyperlinks that you can go to. Again, census.gov, go to Surveys and Programs tab, and you can see all the different types of surveys. Now, all of these surveys are not all conducted at the same time or even across the nation. There's 6 regions. Texas belongs to the Denver region, and we have certain surveys that we collect in this region. One is the American Community Survey. Has anyone received that? Okay. If you have, you'll never forget it. It looks like, what's the underground paper? The Observer or Chronicle or whatever. You know, it's about that size. It's about 48 questions. Everything you don't normally share with anybody is what we're asking. And so, but there's a reason for that because Congress uses that. You know, that's how we decide on a lot of funding. cities, nonprofits, everyone uses that data. That data also goes down to the tract level. If you're not familiar with a tract is about the size of a neighborhood in an urban area. And so you can get income, educational attainment, the number of people in a household, the number of rooms in a housing unit. I mean, it's just a lot of data that we collect. Then we have the American Housing Survey that we're going to get ready to start here shortly. And they select different metropolitan areas, and Dallas this time will be one of those areas. So you might get one of those surveys if you live in the area. A lot of the questions that are asked on the American Housing Survey actually come from HUD. They want to ask questions related to all matters housing, and of course they use that to make sure that they design programs that are appropriate for the population as far as housing is concerned. And that's what helps a lot of first-time buyers, a lot of elderly people, to find the right housing and adequate housing. Also, the Consumer Expenditure Survey, which is sponsored by BLS. And as she mentioned, that's used, we collect that data for them, and that's used to update the Consumer Price Index. And so that has to do with the buying habits of consumers. There's two separate studies, the Consumer Expenditure Survey and the Quarterly Interview Survey and Diary Survey, where we ask respondents to list expenditures. You know, movie tickets cost $12, popcorn was $10, a loaf of bread was $1.98, those types of things. And that's how we find out the spending for our population. The current population survey, which is actually, I think, the longest running survey that we've been doing, also for BLS. And that is for the national and state unemployment rates. So as she was mentioning on the news at 5 o'clock when they say, you know, the employment rate is whatever it is at that time, that's coming from BLS, and we've been out collecting that data. Then the National Crime Victimization Survey. This is a survey that's sponsored by the Bureau of Justice Statistics, and it measures the amount and kinds of crime households encounter during a 6-month period preceding the interview that we do. And the purpose of this is to collect this information about these crimes, which can include theft, burglary, motor vehicle theft, assault, rape, pickpocketing, hate crimes, identity theft, and school crimes to children between 12 and 18. And this is really to find out why people don't report these certain crimes. And so the Bureau of Justice wants to get a better handle on that. The National Health Interview Survey is sponsored by the Department of Health and Human Services. And they cover, that survey covers topics from disability to AIDS. We collect that data and they publish it. Also, it covers types of illnesses, chronic impairments, and all types of health services that people receive when they're ill. And then the Survey of Construction. This is a survey that collects data from permit offices each month, and then they follow up with the builders until the units that they're working on are sold or rented. And so this is something else you might hear in the news also. Housing starts, how many units are being built in certain areas. So this is for the Department of Housing and Urban Development that collects this data. So that's just a sample of some of the surveys that are done in the Denver region. Again, There are so many, and I don't have time. I could talk all day about this stuff, and we don't want that. So, again, my name is Susana Privett. If you don't remember anything else about me, please remember that my assistance doing a workshop presentation for you is free. So just remember that. Okay, thank you for your time.
Okay, since one program is canceled this afternoon, we agreed to push it by 15 minutes. So we have 15 minutes, so lunch will be 12:30. So we will use our 15 minutes to discuss any question you have. And as you can see, these diverse experts here discussed, the issue why this year's conference theme is focused on government information. So I will open for question and answer.
How much do you have in the sense that the various entities that you represent work together, share data, build off of each other? There might be more of an audience connection between the BLS and the Census, but what about that? Does that happen?
I was going to say, if it happens in web design, it would have to be out of Washington. And data, absolutely, we have to work together. Regional offices, no. I would say there's very little communication, and we follow whatever our own national office does.
Yeah, I was just going to say, from an interagency perspective, we do have our chief economist, and I bet each of the agencies do have that, and I would suspect that they speak with each other, but I think that each of the agencies, they get a lot of very different data, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't work together. For example, we probably should work together to try to figure out how many of the patents that are secured right now are from independent inventors of a certain income bracket. And so, that helps drive the need and our understanding of how many pro bono centers that we need around the country. So I think that information like that probably would be very helpful, and I'm not sure that our agencies are working together to find information like that. So good idea.
Just real quick, I don't have anything special to add. Probably, I think the real answer is we should probably cooperate more, especially on data gathering, like the expertise of the Census Bureau. I know the National Institutes of Health, we have perhaps one of the more important initiatives going, the Precision Medicine Initiative, which has now been rebranded the All of Us study. I think that study could benefit from some of the surveying expertise of the Census Bureau. There's immense challenges that all these agencies face with getting that information. The challenge of this All of Us research study, this is NIH's initiative to attempt to gather the actual genetic information from up to 1 million people, so they can start studying that and come up with ways to make the actual prescriptions or medical treatments more tailored to an individual. So there are immense challenges with various groups in the United States. Theoretically, we're going to go around and ask people to let us get a cheek swab from them. Well, you can imagine various things going on in the United States make people in essentially different ethnic groups more or less inclined to respond positively to someone from the federal government that wants something from them. So I would imagine the Census Bureau deals with that on a daily basis. So I would think that, the agency that I represent could benefit greatly from that. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, though.
How well prepared, or where are you finding your people to work in these data jobs? So do you feel that academia is preparing? I am an LIS educator, for example, and I just wonder how well prepared you're finding the workforce to really prepare to do these jobs. And could we be doing more in library skills in particular for preparing the workforce?
So I think that I'm going to answer this a little different because, from in my office, we don't have people who are the data gatherers, right? And so, but we are an office of judges and of examiners, and we do have IT support. And so the primary people who come into our office, like I said, they have technology backgrounds. And they come into a very different job. So reviewing a patent is not like any other job that you would have, that you would think that you would have. And so we have to train them, and they go through very intensive training when they first come in. Even if you are an intellectual property attorney, which was what I was before I came into this job, you're on the opposite end, right? You're filing the patent application. So when you actually have to review the patent applications, is a different skill set altogether. So there are similar skills that translate over, but it's not quite the same. So from a library standpoint, I think what I look for from a support from the library, I do think that a number of you guys do have our PTRCs and our workstation terminals probably in your library. And so educating the folks that are coming into your offices about the different resources that our office has, but then also helping them to be able to do their searches on patents and trademarks, that would be very helpful for us generally as an agency.
I will just say that BLS works with schools a lot. We work with workforce investment boards. Our primary mission is to get the data out there to allow them to use the data in whatever way they see fit. Now, as far as the people that BLS hires, 99% of us are economists. I would say I have not seen any change in their skill levels. Their types of skills have certainly changed over the years. Now, you know, if you're not forget computer literate, if you're not computer exceptional, you're probably on the bottom of the list. Honestly, what I've heard from other managers in my office is that the greater problem they're having is more of an age-related management problem, that dealing with millennials, they're finding is a very interesting job. Well, someone just tossed out at the meeting something about, when they ask me, why do I have to work 8 hours a day? Or why do I have to work 5 days a week? Which they really don't. I mean, we do have various shifts. You don't have to pick that. But that was their example, that evidently a lot of millennials may feel, and I'm not sure I can blame them, that if they can get a job done in 2 hours rather than 20, then that's all they should be required to do is 2 hours of work. In a perfect world, yes, but we have bookkeeping that we have to follow too, you know.
So let me add on to that. One of the interesting statistics that we've seen in our office lately is that overtime rates have gone significantly down. Never, ever has happened in the history of our agency, but we're seeing a lull in overtime rates. And we really think it's because of the millennial generation, right? It's a different mentality. They have a work-life balance emphasis in their life, and so they choose and they opt not to put in the extra overtime, as opposed to our generation, and I'm not that far off from the millennial generation, but the other generation in which we value the extra time. We're going to put it in anyway, so we might as well get paid for the overtime, right? And so that's kind of the trend that we are seeing. Interesting.
Do you think it could possibly be more that people are more salaried and are required for perception to be seen, staying later? And that it's not so much that, look how hard I'm working, I'm staying so late, my car's in the parking lot after 5, and because most of the jobs I work, that's what's expected of you.
Right, and I think it's a little bit different in our agency that even though you are salaried, you are capped at the number of hours that you can work. So you are not allowed to put in That's part of it, but we're also unionized.
Have you looked at nonprofits and how that differs?
No, they probably have.
I'm just really curious if there's statistics about that. I've been in nonprofits since I graduated from library school over 10 years ago, and almost every single job I've been in, except for the current one, have required you to stay late. So much so that I've worked 5 months, 7 days a week, 12 to 14 hours, and I was told that I could only get 2 weeks worth of comp and not get the comp that I actually worked back. So it's like, what do you do when you don't have an HR that's in place to back you up on that, and you can't go to a board of directors that will see that, and if there's no stats that show that this is something that's occurring more frequently in places, then what do you, and you're not labor, you don't have a union, what do you do to, it'd be nice if there was data there.
I was going to say, what do? You change jobs. No, I'm sorry. I'll just say that BLS has actually done some research into nonprofits just in the last 5 or 10 years. It was just nobody cared, or we didn't have money to do anything for them. Now, I'm thinking of one survey in particular that does report establishment employment data, average weekly wages, and average weekly hours. Now, whether it's going to show down to the level that you need, I'm not sure, but it's the same one. It's called Quarterly Census of Employment and Wages, and it's the same one that made the cool maps up there. But there have been separate research projects done that would be published articles, probably in the Monthly Labor Review, which is our flagship magazine. Again, I'm sorry I don't know the actual answer to your question, but nonprofits have definitely been one of our areas of interest recently.
And the data also depends on what we are told. I mean, we can ask questions, we can ask questions and ask for detail, but if it's not provided to us, we can only work. And in some cases, like maybe what you're referring to, if it's expected, but it's not the company policy, but yet internally, it's expected, that may not be something that's reported.
Would you consider collaborating with professional organizations that are taking, soliciting, do surveys within their profession to get that kind of information? Because the Society of American Archivists has sections right now that are sending out surveys about work stress and working hours and compensation and other things like that that are profession specific, at least for archivists. And I think libraries do the same thing, but I'm not sure if that's something y'all would consider teaming up with different organizations to see if they could send out profession specific.
There's a cost involved in doing a survey.
Okay.
So, I mean, and it would be
They're doing the work for you, the labor for you, and they're getting the data and stats. Is that something y'all can collaborate and?
not sure about that. Not done that way, at least not as far as the Census Bureau is concerned.
Come in, another question.
Okay. Yeah, I would say that BLS has to collect the data. They're not going to accept it from another party unless we've contracted with that other party for pay to go out and collect and then report all of their results so that we can have a business relationship and verify the quality of the data. And the other point, like Susana said, is money. We do a couple of surveys for other individual companies or agencies. Social Security is one that comes to mind for a new survey we're doing on occupational requirements. And that wouldn't help you at all, but again, they've contracted with the Bureau to do this establishment survey. And we would be the perfect agency for you to contact about doing an establishment survey. But odds are it would then move on to, well, and how much could you pay us?
Okay, I see a couple of hands.
I guess maybe one of the larger questions is how do you determine the data that you're drawing, you're building upon? Is it set by Congress? Is it driven by the needs of your users or what you hear? Is it a combination?
For the Census Bureau, everything we ask is pretty much approved by Congress. They're our boss. And so we have to, just like we're getting ready to run the questions for the 2020 census by Congress. It's not the first time, but we do it several times up to that time before we publish the survey or the census. And so Congress decides, is this the best question overall for the population? Because a lot of questions are very specific that agencies want or departments want. And so Congress has a committee that decides, okay, this would be the better question to ask of the population.
And I'll just say, before I call on you, that BLS doesn't care about the Congress. Most of our... Oh, shoot, I forgot about that. He made me say it. Dan made me say that. Now, most of our surveys are very old, and they had a well-established economic need. The most recent ones I can think of, again, is the ORS survey. That's replacing the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, which you guys, if you're old enough, may remember that name, but it was last done in 72, I believe. And we are now updating that with this new information on occupational requirements. Prior to that, I think the last new survey we started was the Employment Cost Index. And as far as I know, that was not by congressional mandate. That was that the Bureau saw a need to measure wage changes at the employer level, and we instituted this particular survey. And you've been trying to say something forever.
So I was just curious about, I'm a data librarian, I work often with Minnesota Population Centers products and XMSR products. So for BLS and Census Bureau, what is your relationship with those institutions and how are you, I know they're reaching out to you a lot, but how do you work with them in terms of making sure to have user kind of added value to the data that they're getting from your sources?
I'll have to say, I don't know that we have any official reach out and touch policy. Now, again, in Washington, though, they may do something. But in the regional offices, I'm not aware of anything, other than we know of them, and can pass that information along.
In DC, the Census Bureau has a whole area that works with national partners, and even though we know what that probably means, that also trickles down to just other partners. And so we do reach out to other organizations, agencies, groups, to work with them. And then at a local level, that's part of my job. If I come in contact with a group that says, we really need to form a relationship for whatever reason, then I get them connected to who they need to talk to. And this has only been recently, unfortunately, for the Census Bureau. They've been busy collecting the data, and I think I said this in the workshop yesterday. We've been doing a great job collecting it. We haven't been doing a good job talking to the end user. And so now that has turned around. The light has been turned on, and now that is a focus for the Bureau, and that's part of what I do also on a local level. So we are reaching out to groups all the time now to work with us or to help them with whatever they need.
Sorry, we are really out of time, so thank you. Just join me to thank our panelists.